Thank you so much. Such a delight to be on this forum. And Vikrant has been here before, but it's the first time for me. And I'm sure both of us will keep coming back. The fascinating things that you have told us about Khaki make me want to run to Mumbai right away and partake of some of the walks and take some of, try and eat some of the lovely food that you have shown on screen. I think what we'll do as a format is that we'll we'll take the book in parts. Some parts of it Vikrant will speak about, and others I will speak about. So this is a book essentially capturing 100 years of radio broadcasting in India, and it is primarily about All India Radio. It is not dry history. The style in which Vikrant and I write, those who've read our previous works would know, is all anecdotal. So we try to we talk to a lot of people, we'll go to a lot of places, we research the backgrounds. Then whatever is to be included in the book, we check it against published and available sources, and then we put it down in the book. But it's an easy read. There are a lot of stories in it, a lot of interesting anecdotes, and we do hope the readers would like it and give it the same reception which they gave our previous book, In the Footsteps of Ram. Vikrant, would you like to start off on the history of radio, please?
Yeah, sure, Nilesh. And before that, I just wanted to add, when I was looking at the presentation of Khaki Labs, Nilesh, we did visit Banganga as a
Yes,
part
we
of
did.
our
I was thinking the same. Yes.
in the footsteps of Ram. So
Yes.
that is an interesting story. Though we do believe that it's a very powerful story, though not really associated with Lord Sri Rama's travel from Ayodhya to Sri Lanka, but nevertheless a very a pious place, and we really enjoyed visiting that. So Banganga,
Yes.
I remembered our book. Coming back
True.
to, we don't want to cover a lot of stories which are here already in the book. I'm sure the readers would enjoy reading a lot of very interesting anecdotes. I'm sure Nilesh
Yeah. Yeah.
will
Yeah.
cover them as well. But starting about history, I mean, the World Radio Day was celebrated a few weeks back, and All India Radio, I mean, radio in India itself completed a century, and which is why we named our book as a century of stories from All India Radio. Very surprisingly, radio came to India just a couple of years after BBC was launched. Nilesh, I'm sorry, there's somebody at the door. Just give me a few minutes because I'm home
I'll
alone.
continue with this.
Just
I'll
continue
continue.
and I'll.
You can take a look, and when you come back, I'll give it over to you. Okay. Now, the first radio broadcast, where after the discovery of radio, the first BBC broadcast was 1922. And the very next year, 2023, the first time there was a broadcast in the country in which the Times of India group broadcast some Christmas carols, which were broadcast from Mumbai, and they were heard by the then Viceroy in Pune. So this was the first radio broadcast undertaken by a private corporation. Thereafter, numerous radio clubs began to be formed. So you will take over now about the radio clubs from
Yeah,
24
so
onward.
as we saw even in the presidency banks, Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras being the three large presidency towns in India, the radio clubs got set over there. And as Nilesh was probably explaining, that we started with the India Broadcasting Corporation, in which Marconi actually was one of the shareholders.
His company.
Marconi being he got the Nobel Prize. Though when I was doing our research, we also found that actually people like Tesla, Hertz, and our own Sir Jagdish Chandra Bose contributed a lot to the understanding of radio waves, but it was Marconi who was able to develop a practical application of able to receive and send airwaves across a large distance, and which is what started radio as a technology. And even as early as 1912, you find Titanic using radio to communicate its disaster, and which is why it was a lot of people actually were able to be saved. And after that, the maritime radio thing became really more formalized. So you see, radio being ingrained into our society in a very large way. And as today, as I was preparing for this talk, I found some very interesting anecdotes I wanted to share. So Nilesh, I'm slightly diverting from history of All India Radio, just coming back to that point. Even the other day, we were talking to some of the private radio channels, and somebody wonders why news or current affairs is not allowed on private radio in today, and we'll talk about that a little later. But I wanted to give an anecdote in the early, I think in the 50s, in Sweden, there was a radio talk which said that if you put your nylon stocking over your black and white TV, it'll show in color. And I was remembering Ganesha drinking milk in India. and how that thing went viral. And imagine if radio is allowed to, broadcast some of the stories, how they can really become viral. So it has its own power of radio. And Nilesh will probably talk about Gandhiji talking on radio, but I was also surprised that Martin Luther King, but that came much later in 1963, used
Yeah.
radio in a big way to, I have a dream speech, and why radio can become such a powerful medium. But it was in 1936 that All India Radio was formally formed. And I don't know, Nilesh, you spoke about Lionel Fieldem, who was then the director
Controller
from
of programs.
director of programs from BBC in India, and he spoke to the then Viceroy Lillingthaw, right?
Lindithko.
Lingdingo. I get his name wrong. And he suggested, sir, why don't we call it India State Broadcasting Corporation, a mouthful? Would it be nice if something we depicted a radio which is seen, which is heard across India? I said All India Radio. And that's the way the name came, All India Radio. The acronym AIR also is for air, which is through which the radio waves are transmitted. And that's the beginning of All India Radio. Till independent, it continued to be managed by, there were only 6 radio stations in India, and it was with the government. There were some private radio stations like Baroda Broadcasting Corporation, which are run by the Gaikwads, but that was just around the independence time. And there's a story of that also we can cover about Gandhiji's death, how the Baroda Broadcasting Corporation was talking about. So that's a brief history of how AI radio came to be formed in India. At the time of independence, we just had probably less than 2 lakh radio sets. Nilesh, collect much
Correct.
less,
Correct. Independence. Yes, it started with 9,000. It went to 2,47,000.
2 lakh 45,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was surprised to find that actually the radio license formally was abolished in 1991. I'm sure most of us never paid the 10 rupee license fee. Like the cycle license also, which our fathers, when they were riding a bicycle, had to pay a cycle fee, which was never formally abolished, but it just went away. But the radio license actually continued till 1991, and that's just a tidbit of information I thought I'll share with people.
Yeah.
Before we go on to talking about news readers, commentators, and other things which Nilesh will take over, I just wanted to add that one of the inspirations for us to write this book was the fact that when we were growing up, and a lot of people in Bombay who were listening to Marathi news would know the name of Datta Kulkarni, who is Nilesh's father, and who read the Marathi news for almost 40 years on All India Radio.
Yes,
And
yes.
as children, we used to listen to Datta Kulkarni, Baat mein deta hai, was a very iconic line, which I
Yeah.
also remember. Nilesh, over to you
Yeah. Yeah.
for news and
So,
commentary.
so in a way, actually, I am repaying the debt of gratitude that I owe to All India Radio for two things. One, for the fact कि हमने इनका नमक खाया, उनके नमक खा के हम बड़े हुए. So we are trying to repay that debt of gratitude which we owe to All India, which I owe to All India Radio, and Vikrant is partnering with me. And another important debt that I have to repay is the fact that I currently do a lot of voiceovers and dubbings. I do theater. I've done cricket commentary. I'm a corporate public speaking coach. Now, all these things have something to do with my voice. And the ability to use my voice effectively was actually taught to me by All India Radio. Because I first went behind a microphone on All India Radio at the age of 7. And for almost 8 or 9 years, I continued to feature almost every Sunday on children's programs. So everything about intonation, voice control, throwing your voice, all these things I've learned from All India Radio too. So in a way, every time I communicate verbally, it is All India Radio that is speaking through me. So it is a debt which I owe, I think, which we have partially tried to defray by the writing of this book. Now, certain dates which I would bring you upon about the formation of All India Radio, which is that as we said, 1922 is when the first broadcast took place with the BBC. 23, the first broadcast took place in India. Then a lot of radio clubs were formed. Now, these radio clubs were financed by licensing fees and sets. The licensing fee for the radio sets that were purchased, and there was a 10% cess which was imposed by the government on the import of radio sets. Now, this was given to the radio clubs to run them. However, this was never enough. It was very popular. Music comprised the prime, and devotional music actually comprised the prime broadcasting, took away the prime broadcasting time, but it didn't quite work out. And almost all the radio clubs actually went bankrupt and either surrendered their equipment to the government, or like in the case of the Madras Radio Club, they gave it to the Madras municipal corporation, and the corporation put up speakers in their municipal garden and broadcast music over there. Now, this is in 26 that the Indian Broadcasting Corporation was formed. Now, this was formed with, as Vikrant told you, with shareholding by the Marconi Corporation's company, and there was a Indian investor by the name of Raja Saab Dhanraj Gir, who used to run a place called Dhanraj Mills. Now, with contribution from these two and people in the common this thing, radio was the common people buying small stake. Radio in the Indian Broadcasting Corporation was set up. Now, this broadcasting corporation employed mostly Westerners at very extravagant salaries because it was not known who in India would be able to run them. So this thing also went bankrupt sometime in 1930 with a huge loss of some 4 or 5 lakh rupees. It was closed down. It was finally, there was such a protest against this because by that time there were only about 9,000 radio sets by 1930ish. But there were so many protests from so many stakeholders that the government decided to float its own company. And this is when the Indian Broadcasting Service was formed. And this Indian Broadcasting Service is what Vikrant has told you, was called by that name till Lionel Fielding, who was the controller of programs at that point of time, got from BBC, thought it was too bureaucratic a name. So he walked over to the Viceroy, and Linlithgow was the Viceroy. So he walked over to him and said, Your Excellency, the Indian State Broadcasting Service, a rather longish name. And the Viceroy said, yes, quite a mouthful, isn't it? To which Fielding replied, yes, it's all about sending information over the waves all over India. This is the name he wanted to suggest. And the Viceroy actually rose to the bait and said, oh, you mean All India Radio? And that's how the word All India Radio got coined. In addition to that, we also have the term Akashvani, which is what we now use. Akashvani se hum baat kar rahe hain. Akashvani was a Hindi word to which many people are claiming credit. One, of course, is what Vikrant, you have pointed out in the book, pointed out to me, was Rabindranath Tagore had composed a poem in which he had called it Akashvani. There was another claim in which there was one Mr. Ramarao.
Hosbet Ramarao.
Daughter. Huh?
Hosbet Ramarao.
Hospet Ramarao, whose daughter was claimed a couple of years ago that it is her father who had written a book about airwaves. And it is in that he had coined the word Akashvani. But more than that, I will get the name right. There was another gentleman. The most interesting story is that there's one Mr. Gopal Swami. He had set up, in Bangalore, he had set up a personal radio station. And he and his assistant were actually trying to look for names to what name to call it. And it happens that his wife, Kamlapati, walked in and said, what are you talking about? So the husband said, oh, we are trying to transmit this, sound waves through the Akash and sending it to different people. And that's how it is going to be formed. She said, oh, Akashvani. And that's when the word got coined. So there are varying versions of how the word Akashvani was coined. But the fact remains that Akashvani started blooming thereafter, because the number of sets multiplied, and as Vikrant rightly told you, there were 247 radio sets at the time of independence. And at the time of independence, this concept of radio had caught on because there was a huge listenership. People were interested in listening to radio. Radio was a prestige thing. One Arvind Chettiar from Chennai told us that his grandfather had got the first radio. He had also formed the first Madras radio club. They used to keep the radio outside and play it so that everybody passing by would hear it and also know that they have a radio. It's so interesting. So radio had taken root. It has taken root. It continues to play a very strong role in the life of our people. And most people would tend to think that radio is passé, that radio is no longer heard, or at least all India radio is no longer heard. And what is heard is only the FM channels. So that is the kind of mindset with which we went into the book. But when we actually explored All India Radio, we found that the prestige associated with radio and the new things that are happening in radio, which we'll take up at the end of this session, are so many that All India Radio and radio as a medium have a very, very bright future. Now, how the book is divided is, what do you hear on radio? You hear either the spoken word or you hear music. So there are essentially only two kinds of genres of things that you hear on radio. So we've divided the book into spoken word and music and mixed format, and taken all these three And towards the end of the book, we've tried to see the problems that are faced by All India Radio today and trying to find and what are the solutions being worked out from them. So I
Yeah,
will deal with
Nilesh,
the part.
we'd also like to talk about, and I'm sure that listeners and viewers are interested in the future of radio itself, whether it's a private FM
We'll
channel
take that
or
up in
the
the end. We'll
radio,
take
and
that up in the end.
we
The
want to
future of
talk about
radio
that.
as a category
Yeah,
and future of All India Radio within that slot. We'll certainly
yeah,
do that in the end, Vikrant. So
absolutely.
now what we will do is I will take up the portion on the spoken word and Vikrant will take up the portion on music and the commercial aspects like ads and all. And then we will go on to analyze the future of All India Radio. Okay. Now, when you say the spoken word is in various things happen on radio. One is the news. Another is sportscasting like commentary. Then there are plays, there are poetry reading sessions, there are stories which are told on radio, and then there are things like features and magazines. We explored all of them. Before we went into it, we did not actually realize that such a large range of things were actually being done on radio. When we went in, we realized that, and we realized the stellar work that radio is actually doing in that direction. So first and foremost, we listen to the news on All India Radio. Of course, there are many private radio channels, and the kind of debates that take place on television uh, on politics are nothing short of jokes and often seem to be like some kind of farce. But the reliable quotient on news continues to be All India Radio. All India Radio is known for its accuracy. It is known also for its correct use of language. Remember, when we were kids, we were often told to listen to the English news to understand what diction and what accent and what pronunciation was actually all about. So they were very particular. In the 50s, for instance, the radio news was read by people like Melville DeMello, of course, is the big name in that. In addition to that, there were so many other people like,
In fact, Nilesh, I just want to interrupt. Barun Haldar used to
huh,
actually call up the embassies to understand
I'm going to tell that story, Vikrant,
the
because
name. Yeah, please.
I'll
Yeah,
take those stories. So
yeah.
there were many people like Pearson Soreta, Diki Ratnagar, Lotika Ratnam, Barun Haldar, Roshan Menon, Sushil Zaveri. In Hindi, there were other people like Ramashray
Devanandan
Prasad Singh,
Pandey.
Pandey, Devkinandan Pandey. There were so many of them which were, and they were actually superstars. Now, what did they do? Barun Haldar, for instance, would always ensure that the correct names were pronounced in the correct way. Now, I was told by a friend who worked for radio that when Prakash Padukone was first playing the All England Championship and was likely to win, he actually called up Padukone and found out how is your name pronounced because they did not want to pronounce it wrongly. Now, it is said that Barun Haldar had a cubby hole in which indexed with alphabetically there were pronunciations of names of various people. And even when a foreign delegation was coming, he would regularly call up the embassy and find out how names were pronounced. They were so very particular about that. Now, one of the newsreaders from the Marathi news unit told me that we have Bombay people would know, we have something called Gudi Padwa. It is said that two senior English readers in in the middle of a great argument came into the Marathi unit and said, we have an item to read about Gudi Padwa, but what we want to know is whether it is Gudi Padwa or Gudi Padwa. Is it D? Is it DH? Now, on that point, the news bulletin was stuck. Until they were actually able to verify this from the local people, Marathi speaking people there, they did not broadcast that particular news item at all. Now, that is the degree of attention that is paid to pronunciation, diction, and the correct use of language in that. For instance, Barun Haldar was very particular about how a sentence was framed. That's also why we heard radio. Barun Haldar, when he received a bulletin which to be read out, as he was switching on the mic, he would particularly underline words, cut out some words, mark places with commas and exclamation marks to find out with what feeling it was going to be read. And if any sentences required changed, just as he was reading the news, he would continue to scribble in the background and continue to change the sentence structure. This was so very, so much attention was paid to it. As far as the accuracy was concerned, Milind Deshpande, a friend of mine who worked in the Marathi news unit, told me that at the time of the Bombay blasts, almost there were three blasts, and this is what the person on the ground had reported to All India Radio. And All India Radio was ready to announce three blasts. But meanwhile, all the private radio stations, including television stations, were saying चार blast हुए हैं और अभी पांचवा होने की संभावना है. They were trying to whip up a frenzy. When he
TV
heard
stations.
this,
TV
yeah,
stations.
he rushed to the newsroom and asked the newsroom editor, can we really say four? Because everybody is saying four. He says, no. Till my man on the ground actually says it is four, I am not going to say four. We are going to say three. And then they called up the person on the ground. The person on the ground verified it was 3, and radio started saying 3. And suddenly all the private channels took a total about turn and started saying they were 3 blasts. Now, Million says that if in the government we had made a wrong statement like that, even in a government setup, we would have been suspended because we place so much emphasis on accuracy. But in the private sector, they just took a about turn and started doing something, talking about something else. So radio is known for its accuracy. It is known for its diction and pronunciation. And the people working in it are such big stars that, for instance, Ramanuj Prasad Singh, who was the leading Hindi newsreader, would never book a railway ticket under his own name. He would always book his ticket as R.P. Singh. Because if he said Ramanuj Pratap Singh and people were scanning that reservation list which used to be put up on the dabba, people would come rushing to him and not let him travel properly. Because everybody knew him from his voice. As long as he didn't speak, it was fine. Now, they were such stars that it is said that Jasdev Singh, who used to do commentary for various sports, he was head of sports in All India Radio for many, many years, and the face of All India Radio for the Republic Day and the similar celebrations. He was in Lahore, and he helped a blind man, a visually disabled man, cross the road. And as he spoke to him, that man said, "Aren't you Jasdev Singh? I've heard your voice." Now, the voice was so popular that a person in Pakistan actually heard his voice and recognized him. Another anecdote that came in was that Ghulam Ali once said after a concert that he would always tell all his shagirds to listen to the Urdu service of All India Radio, because that is where Urdu was correctly spoken. That is the kind of credibility that All India Radio has built up into the news. Now, the news is broadcast in all the Indian languages, in English, Hindi, and certain languages like Dari, Pushto, Kashmiri, Punjabi. It is done from Delhi, and in all other cases, it is done from the respective stations. Now, initially, when my father used to work, it was all done from Delhi. But now the language units were shifted out and they were sent off to their respective capitals because they wanted local flavor. Now, the news bulletins are made in the central newsroom over here, where they are divided. Initially, there used to be these teleprinters on which the news would come and the editors would scribble and send off Marathi, Gujarati. They'd send it off to various news units where they were translated and broadcast. Nowadays, of course, it's all done on the computer. There are softwares available for it. New ones are being developed by which respective regional news is taken. Bulletins are created and sent off to the individual stations from where they are broadcast. Only sensitive languages like Dari, Pushto, Punjabi, at that time for security reasons, also for technical reasons, are broadcast from Delhi. So news is covered in many, many languages all over the country, and it continues to be one of the most reliable pieces of information that anybody would actually like to
Nilesh,
work for.
I just want to interrupt here when you spoke about Barun Haldar.
Yeah.
I also remembered that one of the Doordarshan newsreaders was actually shagged because she said instead of Xi Jinping, she actually said 11 Jinping for the Chinese.
11 Jinping. Yes, yes,
And
yes.
that's the difference between All India Radio and others, where
Yes.
there's so much focus
No, the
given.
television reader said it wrong. And when I asked my friends there, why did she pronounce it wrong? He says, because she had not heard Barun Haldar and Melville de Mello speak.
Yes.
That's the thing. Incidentally, Melville de Mello was the biggest name in broadcasting at that point of time. And one interesting piece of information is that when Mahatma Gandhi was shot, they heard the shot live in the radio station. Now, it was a customary for radio station from their studio number 5, where I have also recorded programs later on. It gives you goosebumps to get into those studios. That in studio number 5, every day they would stand by for Gandhiji's prayer meeting. And this Gandhiji would always be dot on time. And this particular day, he was 5 or 7 minutes late. People thought maybe he had got late for some reason, and they were just waiting for this thing to happen when a crack was heard. Everybody still ignored it, thinking that maybe it was something had fallen or something like that had happened. But then they heard voices saying, "Gandhiji ko goli lag gayi." And that is when there was complete stunned silence in All India Radio, because they realized they had just heard Gandhiji being shot live in the studio itself, magnified many times over by the speakers. This is when Melville de Mello was called up to do a running commentary on Gandhiji's last rites and where his body lay. And that piece of broadcasting is actually one of the most powerful pieces of broadcasting that have ever been recorded anywhere, probably in the country, maybe all over the world. Melville de Mello later on said, yes.
7 hours of...
Yes, he spoke 7 hours non-stop on that. And he said later on that I saw Jawaharlal Nehru stand next to me and weep, copiously weep. And he said that also on radio. So there were these great names which were associated with radio, and they have gone to building the edifice that radio is today. This is all I want to speak about about news, and we'll now turn to sports commentary. Now, another major reason why people listen to radio is because they want to hear sportscasting, various sports events being broadcast. And in that, I think it is said that cricket became a religion in India only because of the transistor revolution, when everybody could carry small, the radio became shrunk and became small, and All India Radio started broadcasting commentary, particularly in local languages. Now, the
Nilesh,
first.
sorry, I just want to interrupt here to add a little bit of history that in 1934, before All India Radio started doing cricket commentary,
Hmm.
there used to be something called synthetic cricket, where each ball from Australia would be telexed to BBC, and the commentator in BBC would actually use a pencil to make the noise of how the ball is being hit, and each ball from the telex would be read out, and that's the way people in England were listening to the Ashes being played
Ball
in
to ball live thing, yes,
ball to
yes.
ball live.
That
Yeah,
that that Vikrant, that is how we also do commentary now, because right now access to the cricket field in international matches is only to the superstar commentators. So
yes,
all of us who do cricket commentary now from India, we sit in studios, we watch the match on television, and as it unfolds on television, we are doing a verbal commentary
yes,
for it.
yeah,
So it's still second hand, but still continues to be effective. Now, 1934 is when the first commentary was broadcast in India,
yeah,
and this
yeah.
was a match between the Parsi Gymkhana and the Muslim Gymkhana. And the commentator in that was Bobby Talyar Khan. Now, this is another name that would have probably stirred interest in some people's mind. And Bobby Talyar Khan was one of the ace commentators. Thereafter, it was taken over by Devraj Puri, Pearson Sureta, Anand Stitalwad, Berry Sarvadikari, Ashish Ray, Surjit Sen, and Vizi. Vizi was the Maharaj Kumar of Vizianagaram. His style was the most interesting. He was a prince. It is said that he never did a ball by ball commentary, because there are two styles of doing a commentary on radio. One is to do a ball by ball commentary, and one is to generally sum up what is happening on the field, etc. So now he was given the commentator's box had a scorer, but Vizzy used to carry his own. A scorer used to accompany Vizzy to the commentator's box. And Vizzy's style was that he would say the first ball is being bowled, and then he'd go on to talk about the weather, he'd go on to talk about the background, about something else happening on the field, looking at people, talking about them, some stories about the cricketers. And when this became too much, his commentator's job, he used to sit with a pile of change, coins. His job was to take Vizzy's hand, put a coin in it, and press it hard so that Vizzy realizes he's going off track. So then he would come back and say, "Oh, yeah, by the time I was talking to you, 15 runs have been scored and 2 wickets have fallen." And then he would go back to telling stories again. So this was one style of commentary. And the other style of commentary was the one that Bobby Talyar Khan did, in which he gave a ball to ball and ball by ball description, even to the extent of how the ball thudded against the bat, how the what was the sound in the stadium when the shot was made, and the commentary was so detailed that people would get a visual feeling of how the match was actually happening in front of them. Now, English commentary was all very good, but Hindi commentary is what actually took commentary to every person's house. And the two
Cricket to every
important
person's house
names,
actually.
yeah, exactly. The two important names we have, and that is two Padma Shris, Ravi Chaturvedi and Sushil Doshi.
Yeah,
Now, they again have very contrasting styles. Ravi Chaturvedi was a lecturer in zoology in Delhi University. And he was very fond of cricket. So he once went up at the age of 26, went to All India Radio and said, "I want to do commentary." So the director looked at him and said, "Okay, thode baal safed ho jaye to aa jana." Because the commentator was supposed to be a very serious kind of person, not the boy next door. But anyway, he got the opportunity sometime in 1961 to do a Ranji Trophy commentary. And then the first time commentary was broadcast in Hindi was on the 1st of December 1961 in Kanpur, when the Indian team played England. And of course, India was at that time soundly thrashed. Sushil Doshi had a similar story. Sushil Doshi is an engineer, continues to, at the age of, I think, almost 80 plus now. He's a very good friend, and he's a kind of mentor to me now. He wanted to see a cricket match when he was young. And when he was about 7 or 8 years old, his father took him to the stadium. The tickets were sold out. But the father and son stood at the gate for 2 days, till one policeman finally kindly looked at them and said, "Acha, aap jaake dekh sakte ho." He saw the match and it worked out. He became a cricket player, and he brought another quality to the test commentary in Hindi. He says that since he was a player, he not only saw how a batsman was hitting the ball, he also saw what he did before that. So he typically told me that I would say सामने से गेंद आई, उन्होंने स्क्वायर कट करने के लिए अपने बल्ले से पहले जगह बनाई और फिर बहुत प्यार से उसको स्क्वायर कट करते हुए बॉल को चौके के लिए भेज दिया. So he would say talk about the stance that the batsman took, the way the batsman stood, and elaborate on that so that even people's ideas about how good commentary was established. Now we are running out of time, so I'll kind of wind this up fast on this.
I just want to
Incidentally,
add, Nilesh, one quick point that
yeah,
when
yeah,
you mentioned Sushil Doshi, शॉर्ट पिच गेंद थी, ऑफ स्टंप के बाहर बैकफुट पे गए, स्ट्रोक के लिए जगह बनाई और स्क्वायर कट
वही,
किया 4 रन के लिए. He's
absolutely.
using a lot of English words, and I think that's what Ravi Chaturvedi also told us when Ramdhari Singh
हाँ,
Dinkar's son-in-law interviewed him,
of
saying
Ramdhari Singh Dinkar.
you can't use choti tang and lambi tang for.
And
Uh,
flip, you can't say पर्ची.
हाँ,
पर्ची पे खड़े हैं एक फील्डर. तो इसे
हाँ,
छोटी टांग की तरफ मार दिया, बड़ी टांग की तरफ मार गया. That is when the idea was dropped and all the technical words were kept as English and everything else
English.
was transferred to Hindi. Now,
Yeah,
commentary incidentally even now is done for all games. Football commentary, you have commentary for hockey, you have commentary for games like wrestling, you have commentary for billiards, you have commentary for chess. Now, I know a good friend of mine is Raman Bhanot, who is a sportscaster of repute, and he also does commentary for billiards and chess. Now we asked some people, how do you cover different sports? So we were told that Novi Kapadia told me. Novi
yeah.
Kapadia was a commentator for football who unfortunately was very sick and passed away before the book could be published, even before we actually finished writing it. He told me that some games are more amenable to ball-to-ball commentary, for instance, cricket or even football or hockey. But he said, how do you do ball-to-ball commentary on table tennis? Because the speed of the game is so high that you really need physical energy to continuously concentrate on the ball. But you can't talk about what is happening to, because by the time you end up selling how one ball was hit or one shot was played, you will have another 20 shots having been played. So he said, there we concentrate on the player, his background, his stepping back, his distance from the table, and we try to commentate on that. Then he said that about, for instance, wrestling. He said for wrestling, what do you tell? I mean, a bout sometimes gets over in 90 seconds. What kind of thing? In a 100-meter dash, what do you do? So there you research the background of the players, the various records that are laid. What are the challenges of running that particular game? What are the rules of, for instance, Greco-Roman wrestling? And try to incorporate them into commentary. So commentary is very vital. Commentary, despite television, radio commentary continues to be heard because, as Raman Bano told me, there are sports fanatics and there are sports flirts. So he said the sports flirts went away to television, but the sports fanatics and the real sports lovers stayed on with radio because radio is where the main thing is.
I
Now, in
have I have
addition to
some
this,
Nilesh, I have some friends here like Polu who are great cricket and sports aficionados, and they might
yeah,
probably be able to tell whether there are some people I know who watch the match on television but actually listen to the radio commentary because
radio commentary. I've done that so many times. That's
yes,
where the real
yes,
game lies. Now,
yes, yes,
one of the programs with the biggest reaches ever in the history of radio is the Prime Minister's Man Ki Baat. So
absolutely.
that is broadcast currently. I won't go into details, but that is broadcast currently in all the Indian languages simultaneously. And the script of the Man Ki Baat is sent to respective radio stations where the translators are supposed to stay in the radio station overnight and translate, not leak out a single word of that to anyone else. And next day, when the Prime Minister is speaking in Hindi in the Man Ki Baat, the content of that is read out in the respective language from the respective radio stations, and there are some 200 plus radio stations in India as yet. Incidentally, at the time of independence, there were only 9. Today, there are some 240 all radio stations. How we access them, we'll talk about that later. So, Man Ki Baat is one of the prime shows which has today a listenership of some 40 crore people, which is a huge part of the Indian diaspora.
I want
Also,
even Nilesh
it is the program
to
which gets the maximum ad revenues. There
yeah,
are
yeah,
ads on Man
maximum.
Ki Baat running before and after. And almost 10 to 15% of the total ad revenues of radio come from the ads that are there before and after Man Ki Baat. So this is there. In addition to that, there are many other things, like there are plays which are broadcast on radio. A play is recorded every 1 hour play is recorded every month. The spools for the program were initially sent to all the radio stations, and the play was broadcast simultaneously from all the radio stations in India. Now, of course, it goes digitally. And there is also something called a serial play, meaning a play is broadcast in Delhi today, passed on to the next radio station, and by the time it makes the round of all the radio stations and comebacks, it's about 6 months. Many important artists from the movie industry, like say Pankaj Kapoor, Raghuveer Yadav, Manoj Pava, Seema Pava, Raj and Nadira Babbar. Such people have come out of the radio industry and gone to make their moves in radio and television. Now, what I was told by one of the producers on a kasam of secrecy of not taking his name was that Raj Babbar and Nadira Babbar came at the same time for an audition. Nadira Babbar was selected and Raj Babbar was rejected. So he just kept hanging around outside waiting for his then girlfriend to come out and kept appearing for auditions again and again. Till the second or third time he finally made it and they made it onto All India Radio. So this is the story of plays. There are also features and magazines on radio. Now, these are extensively heard by civil service aspirants, for instance. People wanting in-depth knowledge. The difference is that a magazine is like any other magazine. Yeah, it's like any other magazine, except that it is audio. It is an audio magazine. So music is used, live voices are used. For instance, we heard a audio program on chai, on tea. So there were clips from garden people. There were clips from tea tasters. There were clips for normal people talking about chai, and there was music interspersed in between. These are the magazines, and features are in-depth lectures where experts are called and they are asked to speak on topics of their choice. Now, this is the kind of thing that covers almost all of the spoken word on radio. And for talking about music, I think I will speak about. May I speak about classical music in brief, Vikrant, before you
Yeah,
take over the
please,
rest?
please. Before
Yeah.
that, Nilesh, I just want to add when you talk about the spoken word, the
Yeah.
other day I got a tweet from Nilesh Misra,
Hmm.
whose program on he's the storyteller like you
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
name,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he also talked about how AI's reach is unbelievable. But Nilesh Misra's program is extremely popular. There is another program in Bengali. I'm forgetting the name. It talks about a suspense in Bangla, and again, so the storytelling aspect
Yeah. Yeah.
on radio continues to be
Yeah.
extremely popular both in private as well as all India radio.
True, true, true,
Yeah,
true. I'll take 2 minutes on the music because we are running short of
yeah,
time, the
sure.
allotted time
Please.
to us. 2 minutes on the Indian classical music scenario. Now, Indian classical music found its biggest supporter in All India Radio after the local Maharajas and Rajas were abolished at the time of their states were merged at the time of independence. Now,
Yes.
that is before that, the royal families were the main patrons of music. And had it not been for All India Radio, Indian classical music traditions would probably have been forgotten or wiped out after independence if the support was not given by radio. Now, this is accepted by many people. Even Pandit Jasraj at one point of time said that कई साल तक तो हमारे परिवार का खर्चा ऑल इंडिया रेडियो ने ही उठाया है. So all of them have auditioned, all of them have had music on radio. One of the biggest controversies I will just mention about music on radio, which is that uh, the harmonium was banned on radio. Now, some people attribute the banning of harmonium to one uh, Professor
Dr.
Keskar,
Keskar,
who was the
IMG minister.
Information Broadcasting Minister, which is actually not very correct because this was actually banned by Lionel Fielding in 1940, much before Keskarji became the Information and Broadcasting Minister. It was broadcast in 1941, and I think it was sometime in Indira Gandhi's tenure as Information and Broadcasting Minister that the
In the
harmonium was
60s.
brought back. In the
60s.
meanwhile, harmony was completely banned, and the reason for banning was that it was a very technical. Even Rabindranath Tagore
Yeah.
supported the banning of the harmonium on radio. Now, the reason for banning was that it is said that on a stringed instrument, see, unlike fixed notes which are played in Western classical music, in Indian classical music, you can sing the same note in different ways, and notes often merge into each other. Now, therefore, it gives it a massive range. A keyboard instrument is not able to duplicate this massive range. A sarangi, for instance, is saurangi, meaning 100 sounds can be produced on it. So it closely imitates the human voice. But a harmonium was not able to do that. So it was felt that anybody with a limited range would use the harmonium to mask the limits and not get out of there. So the difference between a good broadcast and a bad broadcast would be nullified. So therefore, a harmonium was banned, but subsequently it came back. Interesting stories about that are that initially most classical musicians were not prepared to sing on radio because it's not एक एक राग का आलाप हमारे को एक एक दो दो घंटे लेता है. आप हमें को बोलते हो 40 मिनट में राग खत्म कर दो. ऐसे कैसे हो सकता है? We are not going to sing. But they were with great difficulty persuaded. Now, Hirabai Barodekar refused to sing on radio because she was told by someone that if you sing into the microphone will suck out your voice and you'll never be able to sing again. So she refused to sing till this. She was given. She was shown that this is not actually possible. There was another sarangi player who was told that if you stay too long in front of the microphone, you are going to lose your abilities to think. Therefore, when the recording was on, every 10 minutes he would lift his sarangi, get up and shift to another angle. So by the time the whole concert was over, he actually did a complete parikrama of the
Microphone.
microphone and came and sat down on the other side. There were also ego hassles. Hirabai Badodekar, Kesarbai Kerkar, and one more name I forget. There was a popularity contest of some kind on radio, and Hirabai Badodekar was first. Kesarbai Kerkar not only refused to ever sing on radio, but she also denied permission to anybody else to sing on radio after to play records of her music. So people were there like that also. But subsequently it caught on, and I think all the major musicians of today owe some part of their career or the other to All India Radio. There are many interesting stories on this, but I think asking us to do that in 1 hour would amount to virtually asking us to tell our life story in 5 minutes. So I think I'll hand it over to Vikrant now to speak about the other forms of music, Vividha Bharati, Western classical, and talk about the future of radio in India.
So two of my favorite topics, one of them is Vivid Bharati, and I'm a avid listener. I'm sure a lot of our listeners here as well listen to All India Radio. There are so many programs, and we have covered many of them in our book. But some of the programs which I recall upfront, they started during the China War. They started the program called Fauji Bhaiyon Ke Liye, and that's one of the very popular programs. My brother was in the army. He would listen to that when he was posted in the Jammu and Kashmir border. And it's timed in such a manner that people, after they finish their day's work, before they wait for the langar in the evening, they're able to listen to this. And they also have Vishesh Jayamala and Vishesh Jayamala, on which actually some film star comes. The first one was Nargis, who came on Vishesh Jayamala. There is a program called Sakhi Saheli. Very surprisingly, while it is a program meant for ladies, I think almost 30 to 40% of the listeners are men. I myself listen to it a lot when I'm traveling on the road. It's got amazing anecdotes. It talks about recipes. It talks about gharelu nuskhe, and of course songs. Sangeet Sarita is a very popular program which a lot of people listen to because there are a lot of people who are interested in classical music, and Sangeet Sarita has become one of the most popular programs for you to understand. And it was Dr. Keskar who started this national program of music,
Music,
which is
correct.
one of the most popular programs on All India Radio. It's a 1 hour concert late in the evening. And he was, we have also mentioned in a book, and I'll urge you to read that, about this whole discussion about how Radio Ceylon captured, because Keskar was not interested in allowing Indian film music. He felt that it will spoil All India Radio. It should be meant only for classical music. And Radio
And
Ceylon with Amin Sayani and Binaca Geetmala became so popular. And many of you who are more than 50 would remember listening in childhood to Binaca Geetmala, and how Amin Sayani made the word Paidan very popular. It was copied from that America's top 50. He used to talk about the top 20 songs, and how every week they're changing their, moving from one Paidan to another and becoming the topmost song. And then later on, Vivid Bharati captured that, and it became extremely popular. People, a lot of who are quiz aficionados will also remember it was actually started by Derek
yeah,
O'Brien's father. Then later on, no, it was Hamid Sayani, then Amin
yes,
Sayani, and then
yes.
Neil O'Brien,
Derek O'Brien.
Derek
Yes, yes.
O'Brien. Derek O'Brien continued that for almost 20 years on All India Radio. Later on, it moved to Doordarshan, where again Bonita Quiz Contest was an extremely popular show, and it continued to run for many, many decades. I'll quickly move on to yeah,
Vikrant,
sorry.
may I add an anecdote, a very personal and very interesting anecdote? If people would ask me what was the highlight of my process of writing the book. Now, I was speaking about Sangeet Sarita to Chaya Ganguly.
Right.
Chaya Ganguly is someone who actually worked very hard on it, and she really took the program to great heights. So she's someone I really love to talk to, because once we would start talking, she would speak almost for an hour and a half. She'd continue to speak. So I could actually write a book on Sangeet Sarita itself based on what Chayaji told me. Now, if all of you remember, there is a movie called Gaman, in which there was a song called Aapki Yaad Aati Rahi Raat Bhar.
That is
Now, that was
Hagan.
an award-winning song, and that was sung by Chaya Ganguly. So one time, what would normally happen in conversations between me and Chayaji, I won't call it a conversation. In receiving, information from her, was that I would normally start talking to her when I was driving on Bluetooth, and it would continue. When I would come home, I would already reach home, park the car, my mobile glued to my ear. I would go in and sit in my chair and continue to listen to her. डेढ़ घंटा बात चलती थी. And every time my wife would say, "अच्छा छाया जी, okay." But this time, I complimented her on the song "Aapki Yaad Aati Rahi Raat Bhar." I said, "क्या गाया है छाया जी आपने?" To which she said, "सुनेगा?" And when I was very stunned, I said, "Yes." And she sang it live for me on my mobile. What a moment it was. It was like proper goosebumps hearing her live singing without any background music, this particular song, and me listening to it just with a dazed look on my face. It's one of the classic moments of, you know, of my journey in writing of this road. Back to you, Vikrant.
Nilesh, on Sangeet Sarita, I also want to add that the title Sangeet Sarita is said by Kaban Mirza, who again, like Chhayajaji,
Abundant. Yeah.
became very popular with one song.
Hmm.
He sang a song uh, in the movie Razia Sultan, Khuda
Yeah.
Khair Kare, and that
Yeah.
became
Yeah.
popular. I just want to quickly move because the listeners might be interested in a lot of ads which come on radio and how they're
Yeah.
different from television ads. And we spoke to Chetan Shachital, we spoke to Santosh
Decide.
Desai,
Decide.
Bharat
Santosh Desai.
Dabolkar, and so
Hmm.
many people. And they talked about, it was very interesting when they said that there is something called a earworm, and the repeated, the jingle, the repeated of the repetition of a particular voice or a phrase becomes so popular, and you have Pan Parag, Pan Masala, or Nirma, that sound which comes before the Nirma ad, that's is so popular. Or you have Hamara Bajaj, or Vico Vajradanti. There are so many ads. I'm sure listeners would probably recall ads for last 30-40 years, which have in fact the Pan Parag Pan Masala ad. The person who created the ad told me that the producer was so happy, the promoter of that brand was so happy with the ad that they didn't allow that ad to be changed for nearly 30 years. So it's amazing to see how the radio ads are so different from what you see on television. There's also something called a radio spot and a radio jingle. And a spot is like a kind of a radio drama which comes on radio, and you have bachao bachao. Somebody might say मच्छरों से बचाओ बचाओ छाप जलाओ, या बचाओ बचाओ, and then it might be Colgate के toothpaste पे 10 रुपए बचाओ. And they would create a lot of these comedy. In fact, I was talking to Chetan Shachital and Bharat Dabolkar, and they also spoke about how mimicry has become or kind of getting misused. And today, of course, some of these actors have actually started filing cases against brands which are blatantly using Dharmendra or Sunny Deol or Amitabh Bachchan. And you have to be careful about how mimicry should not become something insulting to the actor, but actually it becomes a comedy and helps the brand to grow. So there's a lot of debate about how it can be used. Santosh Desai gave a very interesting twist to it, saying there's something called a involuntary music imagery, which gets created. That's a challenge for an advertiser. That's a challenge for somebody who's creating that ad to be able to create such a interesting music imagery around that ad, so that every time you listen to it, because you're not seeing any visual, you're just listening to it on radio, that it remains in your mind. And when you see that brand in a shop, you're reminded of that particular brand. So that the very different from television. It's a very different. We put a lot of interesting anecdotes in our book about how some of these ads were created, including translations into different languages, because that again becomes a challenge. And you have to be very careful about how the same word uh, can mean something very different in another language, and that needs to be taken into account. Nilesh, I feel that we are sort of we want to take a lot of questions. I can see a lot of questions being popped up, so maybe we'll answer some of those questions. Uh,
I,
to-
Vikrant, I think we need to tell them about the future of All India Radio before we move forward from that.
yeah,
That
so
is one aspect which probably future of radio, if you want to briefly talk about it, and
I'll
then
talk
future of
in
All
two
India
minutes
Radio,
about.
because there's so much hope in radio. It's not as if
Absolutely.
it's a dead thing. We are not only flogging nostalgia. We are trying to say that the book ends with on the note that there are great things ahead for radio. Now I want to talk about those also. If you
I
could
want to
briefly
talk
talk
about.
about the history of radio, I'll talk about the history of All India
There are
Radio.
today a lot
We
of
are already at
radio
7:05.
FM channels which a lot of people believe actually are much more popular than All India Radio, and contrary to the numbers we have, All India Radio by far, in fact, Nilesh Misra was talking to me saying its reach and the scale is just unbelievable. Most of these radio FM stations cater to local geographies, but it doesn't cover All India Radio. I think there are 2 points of debate which is right now in Supreme Court, where news, current affairs, and broadcasting of sports is not allowed on radio, and that's a challenge a lot of private channels are facing. But over to you to talk about the future of AI itself, which we
Yeah.
believe is very,
Yeah.
very positive.
Yeah. See, initially, before we talk about the future, it is about the challenges that radio faces. Take the fact that it is run by Prasar Bharati, which is an autonomous corporation, so to say, but it's not actually an autonomous corporation because it is still reports to the department. So whereas all the decisions come from the Information and Broadcasting Ministry, the expenses have to be met by Prasad Bharati independently. So against an expense of some 700 odd crores in the year 2022-23, only 300 crores were covered by ad revenues. All the other had to be made up locally. And mounting losses were one of the major concern for All India Radio. And about this, we spoke to Shashi Shekhar Vempati, who was the chairman of Prasad Bharati, and he told us a lot of things that he had done in terms of cost cutting. And cost cutting did not go very well with the older employees of All India Radio because they all thought that their rights were being infringed upon, that uh, creativity was being hampered, that only cost was being taken as a consideration. So Shashi Shekhar ji told us that, I mean, ultimately हम करेंगे क्या अगर हम पैसे नहीं होंगे तो हम चलाएंगे कैसे इन लोगों को सैलरी देंगे कैसे. He gave the example of FM Rainbow and FM Gold on Delhi station, which were simultaneously broadcasting film songs at the same time. And he said, what was the point in doing that? We can take it to one station and merge them together. But the moment they were merged, some DJs were laid off. Now, the number of DJs that were laid off, even though contractual ones, was something like 80 on these two channels alone. And when I talked to Rahul Namjoshi, who heads 94.3 My FM in Delhi, who caters to tier 2 and tier 3 cities, he said that the number of people employed by him was a total of 500, out of which 250 were sales and marketing people to get revenue. He said about 150 were programming people and uh, about 50 or 60 were engineers. He says we work on a very skeletal staff, whereas All India Radio works with massive staffs. These particular 80 DJs that were laid off, that job is done uh, by two, three, or at max four DJs in a private station. So cost overruns are huge, and they have built up in a government system over time. But I think they are gradually being cut down. There was also an entitlement economy. Certain unscrupulous people were taking radio for a ride by calling only their favorites, making payments only to them, or at times recording. So the rule in radio is that if you record outside on the field, you don't pay anybody. But if you call them to the studios, then you need to you have to pay them. So very often some unscrupulous producers called their friends and relatives to the radio station to talk about programs and paid them. Now all these were cut down. Computerization was done, particularly when there were emergency claims being put up. कि हमें तो अभी चाहिए, knowing that a snail mail letter would reach in 3 days and the sanction will come back in many days. So now he computerized the entire system, and any sanction asked in the chairman's office is received within 24 hours. So this has cut down a lot of the entitlement economy. So there's a lot of dissatisfaction among some of the older members of the staff. But most people who are actually passionate about radio, what I found that there was discontentment amongst certain ranks for various reasons. One reason is, of course, these unscrupulous people were dissatisfied. I am not laying anything on them at all. But some people were also dissatisfied primarily because there are no promotions on All India Radio. Many would join as program executives and leave as program executives because that vertical structure was not there. That Shashi Shekhar told us was due to the multiplicity of trade unions who are continuously in litigation. He says 90% of the litigation that I faced when I took over as chairman related to promotion issues in which one union was fighting another. So we were not able to promote people. Then another challenge about staff there was that the ratio of engineers to production people was too heavily skewed in favor of engineers. I mean, 98.3 FM employs only 60 engineers for a revenue of 150 crores. And for a revenue of 300 crores or an expense of 700 crores, All India Radio employs 10,000. And you can't send them back because they're all government employees. And the only way to rationalize it is to let them retire. And as they keep retiring, don't replace them. So a process is on by which people who are retiring are being replaced by contractual employees now who come for a certain period of time. There is freshness of ideas, there is more energy, and they do not probably take the job for granted. But saying all this would do great injustice to 95 or 99% of the people I have talked to who are completely dedicated to their craft. Even in COVID, There was a program which was called, with Ruskin Bond reading out stories. And this became immensely popular, his stories, immensely popular all over the world. And this was recorded by my friend Basudha Banerjee, oftentimes with chaddars in her kitchen or in her washroom, with chaddars draped on the walls to you know nullify the echo effect. And then this was recorded and broadcast. Now there was a program called Jungle Jungle Phir Baat Chali Hai, which had stories from the Panchatantra, Hitopadesha, etc. Now there my friend Manoj Atri got his 8-year-old daughter to record the theme song at home in a machardani. Now, look at the kind of dedication people are doing. And he told me another funny story. He said when she was recording it, that laughter was not coming out. So, whereas my wife held the microphone before her hand, I did a Helen style filmy dance in front of her. So that looking at me, she started giggling. And when she started giggling, she got the right emotion. Now, this kind of passion, where are you going to see for what is merely a job? So, the people who work from All India Radio are all very passionate people and they are really devoted to their craft. Now, what's the future of radio? 2 minutes and I'll tell you. Future of radio, one, there is a news on air app, which is somebody had made reference to it right here. And
Yeah.
that is an application which is downloadable to your mobile. On the mobile, from anywhere in the world, you can listen to all the 240, 50 odd radio stations of All India Radio. Sitting in Delhi, I can listen to Mirrors, Sangli, Isal Karanji. He said, what a great morale booster. A soldier sitting on the border in somewhere in the Himalayas could probably listen to the music coming from his station in Kerala. How much of a connectivity it builds. So this is no. I'm afraid we'll take the questions later anyway. So this uh, news on air app is an excellent addition to the thing. What the reach of the news on air app when I last heard it was something like 5.6 million, which by now has probably reached about roughly 2 crores. But 2 crores means there are about 8 crore listeners listening in on there. Similarly, there are also 8 crores. Then went up to 20 crores. Sorry, I mistake the statistic. Yes, it's a good app. The YouTube channel had 5.6 million, which has now gone up to about 2 crores. And the News on Air app has some 20 crore people listening in on it. And they also, because it has an application which has a backend, they're able to monitor who is listening to what program from where. So they discovered, for instance, that Vivid Bharati was extensively heard in Spain. Spain was the biggest market for Vivid Bharati. So they wondered how it was. Now that is because they later discovered that in order to get a European visa, many workers from Haryana and Punjab often go to Spain, where visas are very easily given for tomato picking season. There they go, they feel lost, they are not disconnected with home, and they listen to Vivid Bharati there. So such data is being generated and is being used extensively for fine-tuning All India Radio's programming. This. Then there is something called the free dish. Now, the free dish is literally a dish which is given by Prasar Bharati for free in areas where there is no coverage of either the satellite or of terrestrial broadcasting or any other way. And there, this can be connected to a television set, and it can also give some, I think, 40 or 42 radio programs. Extensive. This is again a listenership of well over 20 crores, well over 25 or 27 crores. And this is a great revenue spinner from All India Radio, because private channels are now vying with Prasar Bharati to host their programs on that channel. So even on the television part of it, Sony is there on the free dish, and so many others. Z5 is there. All of them are there on the free dish. What part of the free dish listeners listen to radio and what listen to television, see television, we do not quite know. There are no statistics available for that. But it is reasonable to expect that radio would also be heard on that particular channel. Now, this is a major revenue spinner for Prasar Bharati at the moment. And the latest development is something called direct to mobile broadcasts. That has been activated only recently, and this is where we are at par with the world, and something has been developed in collaboration with IIT Kanpur, where you don't need an application, you don't need an internet. Every mobile phone, with the addition of a small chip costing barely a few hundred rupees, probably 100, 120 rupees, becomes a radio. And direct broadcasting, exactly like a transistor radio, without internet, without any application, you can listen to radio stations by tuning in them on radio. Now, these are three marvelous things that are being done. Besides, data management is being done. For instance, there is a national data retrieval system, in which what was happening formerly was that All India Radio has about 400 news correspondents spread all over the districts. From each district, they would file reports which would go only to that particular regional headquarter. The nation had no access to them. So now they have formed a pool into which everything is lodged, and from which any producer anywhere in the country in the 250 radio stations can pick up news items that they want and broadcast them on their channel. So this is something new that is being done. The data management system is absolutely magnificent. And not only that, they can, for instance, if you are making a documentary, audio documentary on Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, now simultaneously, pieces can be picked up from Calcutta, from Cuttack where he was born, or from Imphal, or from any other part of the country. And these pieces can be put together to form a audio program. Now, this is another massive thing that is happening. Many new softwares are under development, and the way radio is going now, I and Vikrant are fully confident that radio, all India radio particularly, has a great future in this country. On that, we sign off. Would you have any questions, please?
Yeah, Shashikala, there are a
And you
lot
can
of
tell us who
questions.
you want to address
There are
it
a lot
to.
of questions. Let's take them.
On the chat box, so much of appreciation for what was shared by both of you. But most of all, some key questions. Mohan Narayan sir says the first broadcast of Times of India in 1923, was it made from Radio Club Bombay?
Pune.
No, the Radio Club was formed later. Times of India did it on its
Okay.
own. Radio Club was formed a little later.
I
All the
see.
radio clubs were
And
formed
there's
and
a-
disbanded between 23 and 26.
Okay. So regarding Footsteps of Rama, Jyoti asks whether audiobook is available, and what was the, how did you strike on the idea of writing this book quickly?
That's
if you
another
can share.
that's another podcast, Jyoti.
Us will long
It will probably
story,
take
yeah,
us an hour and a half to explain how we got onto the book and what happened. But yes, an audible version is available.
is
Audiobook version is
available.
available. This has also been
Right.
awarded the Best Non-Fiction Book of the Year award for 23-24. This was given by Khaki. And this is the one on
Right.
which a 6-part web series is made. So either
Okay.
listen to Audible or wait for the web series at sometime around Diwali.
Web series, yeah, that'll be really popular. Is there any way to access archival footage of AFST and Anand Setalwad's cricket commentaries?
Yes,
Someone
yes.
wants to go back in.
Yes. This is again something which, Vikrant, I'm taking the liberty of adding, answering this because I went to the archives in Delhi.
Okay.
Yes, archives are being digitized. Archives are a massive flow of information. All kinds of things are available in the archives. And currently they are being digitized. And after the digitizing process, where about 80% have been digitized, 10% have been discarded, and other 10 or 15, 10, 12% are being recovered from damaged tapes because they were only on spools. And now this content is being sold. So they are sold as background for documentaries, they are sold as a background for movies and various other places. But yes, you can, certain parts of the archives you can access, you can send in a request, and you can go to the archives and decide what you want to listen to.
Right. Nikhil Pandya wants to know if he can get a personal copy, signed copy of your book, Akashvani.
With
Yeah,
pleasure,
certainly.
always. It's
We'll be
always
happy
nice
to
to
do
meet
that,
you.
Okay. Okay.
If you, yeah.
So book signing is required. And others are all of appreciation of the nostalgia that you recreated really over a period of, say, some 80, 90 years now. And people remember it as going to school, doing housework, things like that. It was just a background. And someone, Jyoti is asking, Bela Ke Pool, was it a last program at night?
That's right. But now the AIR has changed that if you go on to news on AIR app and radio, FM Rainbow and FM Gold, it continues even after midnight. There are a lot of
Yeah.
programs which are specifically for, like there was one program for the truckers, which used to
Yeah.
be playing after midnight. It was meant for people who are driving on the highways. So it continues. Yes, at one time it used to stop at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, which was the last program. But now it goes on till late in the night.
Now that he talks about late in
And
the night, I have an interesting anecdote to add to this, which is that I asked one of the commentators, I said, is radio as a medium dying out? You know, are people listening to radio commentary, or do they only watch matches on television? So he gave an example of some 5-6 years back when he was doing commentary on a Delhi India West Indies match in West Indies. So it ended at about 3 p.m. and Yashpal Sharma was the expert commentator in the studio. So as a matter of formality, at 3 he asked the audience, "Do you have any questions?" Expecting there'll be none, but there were so many questions that the broadcast had to be called off at 4:20. 1 hour after questions started. So imagine that many people were listening into the commentary at night. So does it look like a failed medium now? The people say that
Okay.
people only listen to FM. For instance, a criticism is that you only listen to FM. And FM, Rahul Namjoshi, my friend who runs 98.3 FM, told me very clearly, we only run contemporary film music. We do not do any other category. We do not do old songs, very rare. Maybe 20% of the time is for old songs and 80% are for contemporary music. So there, the people from radio, my friend Jayant Patrikar, who is a senior announcer in radio, said, and even Yunus Khan said this, which is said that he said, do you know which is where Mohammad Rafi is the most popular in the country? He said, it is in Kerala. They also have a Mohammad Rafi
Wow.
road. So people who are not actually listening to radio, why would somebody there have a Mohammad Rafi road? And why would Mohammad Rafi be so popular? He's not singing contemporary film songs. That. And one more, which is that he said, as an experiment, you stand in front of any teenager and start humming an old Kishore Kumar song. He said, that person will join up with you. He said, try as an experiment, and I challenge any of you to try that. The moment you start humming an old song, somebody else will start humming with you. So if they were not listening to these songs on All India Radio, how the hell is this happening? So, ऐसा नहीं कि radio wipe out हो गया. All India Radio is there, it's alive, it's kicking. Yeah. Any more questions, please?
Sorry,
this
GS
was so
says
interesting
house
to-
programming. GS says
Yes.
house programming organized on AR. Is it like FPC of television programming?
Different programs are organized in different fashions. Like this would actually require you to read the book because the chapter details how music programs are organized, how news is organized, how does the newsroom work. So all those portions
we are given that in great detail.
Anecdotes. So you'll have to read the book to find that out.
Yeah.
But yes, about the organization of different kinds of how a play is organized, how our music programs are organized. All that is given in great detail in the book. So I think you would have to read the book to decide that.
Okay, so that will have to be a given then. And all this aside, I think all of us have heard on the lighter side about how Amitabh Bachchan auditioned and was not found good enough for a reader post or similar job profile. Is there any truth in that?
That is true. He himself mentioned it.
It's again, yes, he did say that, but it's anecdotal. So, but I guess, yes, if he says so himself, then true.
We have not heard it from All India Radio. We heard it from
Amitabh. We heard it, exactly.
Yeah. Similarly, there's also the story about, Uttam Kumar, I think. I think the Bengalis know this more than anything, that during the Durga Puja, there is some rendition of Chandipat. And I think he was not found good enough, or there's a lot of criticism. My husband's a Bengali, so he speaks a lot about that.
Okay.
And now,
yes.
And Harish says,
there was Rajan Sajan Mishra were asked to sing by their guru, asked to sing on radio. But when they went to the radio station, they were told you are not graded artists, so you cannot sing. And therefore they said, take an audition. If you pass the audition, we'll let you sing. So they refused to sing on radio. Till finally one time, without an audition, an A+ accreditation was given to them, and then they started singing on radio. So many such things are there. Many stories like this have happened.
And finally, with the Champions Trophy final tomorrow, Harish says, anyone doing radio commentary on the final from Dubai?
I am not for sure.
I don't know.
I'm not for sure. But rest assured, if anybody is doing the final, he or she is not doing it from Dubai. He or she is doing it from a televised version of the commentary. Most commentators, all commentators, except people like Sehwag and Gavaskar and that level of people, nobody else goes to the field. It's just too expensive.
I'm sure they don't listen to the sensitive, ball hitting the bat or the pad. Through
television, you will never hear that. Television relies mostly on television. What is happening is that a ball has been hit. Now the camera is following the ball. As a commentator, I know. So very often you don't know whether it's going to be a six or the guy is going to be caught out till the ball actually lands on the ground. In a radio commentary, all that is being graded. Ball हवा में चली गई है, हवा में जाते हुए boundary line की तरफ जा रही है, फला player उसके पीछे आ रहा है. You hear the pace. Radio, you are just television. You are just passively sitting there and listening to it. Radio, it's such an interactive thing. You are actually getting a feel of what is happening on the field. That's why people listen to radio commentary. Any sports buff would say that radio is the only satisfying commentary. Everything else is not.
Right. So
I'm not against television. We are not against television. We might do a book on that later. But yes, today we are talking about radio.
Part 2. Yeah. So most of all the other comments are really, heartfelt about some, personal experiences of how they felt about various programs. So we have, almost come to the close of the.
I just answer one question, Shashikala. Somebody asked whether the programs are repeated or are they original. Some programs are repeated. For example, there are many programs which have a time slot. Sangeet Sarita comes in the early morning. Then it also comes in the evening. there are certain programs which get repeated, but most of them are time slot, which is a big difference between All India Radio and private FM channels, which is a very random, programming of various genres which they broadcast. While All India Radio, a lot of people love for the fact that there are very specific time slots given for, and there are diehard fans who tune on the radio only for that particular time because they know that it is going to come at that particular time.
Yes, certain. Prasad, you are right. Many programs are recorded and repeated, as Vikrant is saying. But then when you have 24/7 broadcasting, sometimes it is not possible to do it is not feasible at all to do live programming for everything. So some programs are live, some programs are recorded, some programs are reported, recorded and repeated.
But you see that
everywhere. Everywhere you find the same debate. You look at a television debate, the same topic will be hammered all over again, all through the day, all through 3 days. For every topic. So they are doing it. That's a cost saving. They are doing
it. We didn't cover, Western music. I completely missed that out because we had time. There's some very interesting stuff in the book on Western music and why it sort of, doesn't occupy as much space as it was earlier. But there's some very interesting things one can read in the book about that.
Those aficionados should buy the book then, to get a real insight into your take on the background of Western music as it evolved in Akashvani.
Yes.
So with that, I think we are pushed for time. So let's bring the program to a close with heartfelt thanks. And on behalf of Khaki and all the various listeners who
somebody wants to know about the signature tune. Kaufman composed it. The signature tune was composed by Kaufman, who was a Jew, a German Jew who had come and taken shelter in India. It was composed by him, and it was played by the All India Radio Orchestra at that point of time. Of which, at one point of time, Ravi Shankar ji was the first conductor. Even the Vande Mataram that is singing in the beginning was.
So many stories and anecdotes we obviously didn't cover because the book has so many stories. It would take, it would, like, for example, I've talked about ads and Vivid Bharati in a very, it's just 7 minutes. We could talk about that for an entire hour, so there's just amazing stuff. It's the Rag Shivaranjani for some people who don't know. That's the signature tune which is based on. So that's just in addition to the Walter Kaufman.
Thank you.
The book is 65,000 words. At 110 words a minute, that's how many minutes of talking time we can have. We can speak about it for 12 hours to cover the book and another 10 hours to give our comments on it. It's not feasible within a 1 hour podcast. So next time call us for 22 hours. We'll make sure that everything is covered.
I think you got the pulse of the people because people had started talking about the iconic signature tune, and you gave us a bit on that as well. Thank you so much, Vikrant and Neelesh. The collective wisdom and knowledge and the information that both of you have gathered over your books and experiences, it came out pretty deep and much appreciated by all the listeners here. And you made Akashvani to be a really evolving institution and not the colonial leftover that it was, but how much it has evolved and what kind of viewership it has, listenership it has now. Thank you very much once again for coming to Khaki and spending time with us. And I think with that, I will wind up. And we wait to see you both again and for your movie and that series as well. So to everyone who have tuned in, have a good evening. And till the next Saturday, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.